What's up, Joe? What's up, everybody? This is Sports 360, and I'm Jeff Fannell. And today I'm excited because on Sports 360, we are moving into a new realm, a new space, if you will, because joining me as a co host is Rob Duran of Rob Duran Sports. Rob has been with us multiple times talking about baseball, but we are now joining forces as co hosts of Sports 360, where we'll talk about baseball and other comings and goings in the world of sports. So, Rob, man, welcome aboard, man. I'm glad to have you as part of Sports 360.
Hey, Jeff, thank you so much, man. This is definitely an honor, and I'm definitely grateful for the opportunity. I'm ready to get started, man. This is an exciting partnership that we got going on, and I'm hyped, man. I'm ready.
Yeah, so am I. So am I. I always love talking with you both in terms of, when we've been on the show, but also offline. I mean, we have a lot of good conversations offline about the world of sports, and it just seemed to make sense, right? That we should come together more on the regular to talk about, the things that are going on in the sports world, whether it's
Yeah,
baseball or otherwise. And for our listeners, one of the things that we'll be doing is, in addition to, you and I talking about different issues in and around sports, we'll also have guests from time to time. And also from time to time, I may come back with some quick takes in between our broadcasts. But all in all, man, I'm just looking forward to, like you said, man, let's get it going and just chop it up about what's going on out there in sports. So I'm glad to have you on board.
yeah, man. Thank you again. Thank you. This is definitely an honor, man.
And today, I think, for this first show together, um, you know, it is baseball off season, right? And so I think it makes some sense to talk about a lot of the things that are going on in baseball. Um, this is the time of year, Rob, where traditionally, right, this is the hot stove. And I kind of joked with you the other day when we were talking about this. I said, you know what? Baseball needs to retire that phrase hot stove because I don't recall, maybe last year was a little bit different because we had some really great free agents out there and there was a lot of big deals done. But for the most part, the last 5, 10 years or so, the stove has been cold. And so I don't think we should call it hot stove anymore. And certainly this year, I think is more of the same. Now, part of that's the pandemic and perhaps, and teams lost money. But just generally speaking, before we get into the specifics, what's your take on this year's free agent market in baseball?
It's been so slow, and the thing is, normally we'll even if the off seasons are slow, we'll see a lot of rumors and things like that. We haven't even had that this year, which is insane considering, we're in the age of social media. There really hasn't been any chatter about some of the free agents. Yeah, we'll hear here and there about the big free agents, but a lot of the other guys that, may not be, I mean, we kind of touched on this offline. Some of the guys who aren't superstars per se, they're not even connected. You don't hear about them. You don't hear about them on TV and radio, whatever it is. You just don't hear about these guys, and it's crazy to me that even the rumors have slowed down in this off season.
Yeah, because coming into this offseason, you know, um, George Springer, Trevor Bauer, uh, JT Realmuto, obviously were at the top of the list of free agents, and rightly so.
Yeah,
But you have other good players like Marcell Osuna, who hasn't signed. A little bit older, but Yadier Molina is still out there. But a guy who really we believe, because we talked about this, has really fallen under the radar is a guy like Marcus Simeon of of the Oakland A's, shortstop, who has just really grown into a great player with great performance year over year, and you don't hear anything about any market for Marcus Simeon. And so what's your take on that? Like, why do you think a guy like Marcus Simeon, who is a really good ball player, seems to be an afterthought?
That's the biggest mystery, I think, in terms of like middle infielders with him, because we've seen the steady improvement throughout his career. There were question marks about his defense, and he made it a point, and he's come out and said it. He made it a point to improve on that. And, he had MVP caliber seasons over the last, in 2019. So it's crazy to see that a guy like Marcus Simeon, and I don't really take, his production in 2020 too too seriously because it was a shortened season, but this guy has made significant improvement over his career. And the fact that nobody has been, like I said, no rumors at all or nothing, he hasn't even been mentioned in like that top tier or maybe even the second tier of free agents out there, it's insane to me, especially a guy like him. He can put up the numbers offensively. Like we said, his defense has improved dramatically, and he seems to be one of those guys that has a positive influence in the clubhouse. And I'm just shocked to see that there is absolutely, at least from what we see, absolutely no market for a guy like Marcus Semien.
Yeah, it really is. And so it remains to be seen for Simeon and some of these other players that we mentioned. I mean, there are guys out there who have World Series championship pedigrees who are out there, whether it's a guy like Jackie Bradley Jr., Justin Turner, Jock Peterson. Turner's a little bit older. Peterson and Bradley Jr. Have some issues. Bradley Jr. his stick is a little bit inconsistent. Peterson, his glove is a little bit inconsistent, right? So all these players have some issues, but these are players who have helped teams to championships, and they're not finding a home yet either. And as we're talking here, Rob, it's January 24th,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we're coming close to, pitchers and catchers, and there are a fair number of bona fide major league players who are still out there on the market.
Yeah, and even guys like, we're talking about shortstops, even guys like Didi Gregorius, who had a really good comeback season last year after the injury season in 2019 with the Yankees. He had a pretty good season last year, and I think he's a solid option, whether it's a stopgap type player or a couple, give him a couple years at short. Simmons, too, who's a defensive wizard, maybe one of the best defensive shortstops we've seen in this era. Again, nothing going on with them either. So it's crazy to me that we're just getting nothing. It's such a slow off season.
Yeah. And then one other guy that I think is worth mentioning here is Nelson Cruz
Yes.
as a DH. And I think Nelson Cruz actually speaks to a bigger issue. And I believe that issue is whether we will have a universal DH, meaning a DH in the National League. And my view is one of the reasons Nelson Cruz hasn't signed, and he has been phenomenal. He's not quite what David Ortiz was as the designated hitter, but he's close. You know what I mean?
Oh
You
yeah.
know, David Ortiz became like the epitome of what a designated hitter should be after he went from Minnesota to Boston, right?
Yeah.
And Nelson Cruz is sort of like that. The production is there, even though he's 40 years old. He shows no signs of slowing down. But I think he's being affected by whether or not we're going to have a DH in the National League, universal DH. And so, because if we do have a universal DH, then his market increases, right? Because now you have
Big
potentially
time.
15 teams in the National League who also would be bidding on his services. And so I don't know if it's by design that the DH issue is unresolved. When I say by design, I'm going to be plain that Major League Baseball doesn't want to agree to a universal DH with the Players Association because it would increase the market
Yeah.
for a guy like Nelson Cruz and other potential DHs out there. I don't know if that's what's going on, but it certainly is part of it. And if I'm Nelson Cruz, I would probably hold out for as long as I could before signing to see if there's going to be a universal DH because, you know, it's about supply and demand. If there's more people demanding, services for Nelson Cruz, then the price goes up. So he hasn't signed, but I think there's a bigger issue going on there with the potential of a universal DH.
I definitely 100% agree with that because and it's not just Nelson Cruz. We have Marcelo Zuna too, who's another guy who the
Yeah.
Braves took advantage of having that DH last year, and he put up big numbers. And even a guy like Jock Peterson is another guy who can be a great DH in either league. So I think that's definitely it. I think once and like you said, I think if I'm Nelson Cruz, I do hold out and just wait to see what's going to happen with that DH because his market is very limited right now on in just the AL. So I think, like you said, I definitely agree. It's a much bigger issue with the guys who may not be playing the field as often.
Right, right. Well, let's talk about some of the signings that we've had. I mean, Trevor Bauer still out there. We have
Hmm.
heard rumors here and there about him. Rio Multo, we're hearing some rumors about him. A guy like Brad Hand, who probably could be, a really useful piece in the bullpen. Some
Yeah,
rumors there, but let's talk about guys who actually signed, and most recently of the bigger names, George Springer, 6-year, $150 million deal with Toronto, a team that has some young talent, and a team that made the playoffs last year, the expanded playoffs. What do you
yeah.
think about that signing?
I think it was a great signing for Toronto. Offensively, they're a team to look at, and they were even before Springer. We saw the kind of numbers they can put up in a hurry last season, and even the year before that. You know, guys like Bo Bichette, Vlad Jr. These are guys who are there to hit, and they can hit. You know, they match up with anyone offensively. And I think the addition of Springer, not just with the offensive production, but also kind of like a veteran presence in that young clubhouse. That's huge, especially because he now gives them a leadoff hitter with consistency, which is something that I think they needed. And then defensively, he's really good. He can play the center field. He can play both corner outfield spots as well. But I like the move offensively. I like the move for the Blue Jays in general. I still do think they have question marks in the pitching, but I think I think they're going with the let's try to outscore opponents if we can't get these pitchers signed. So I really like the signing for George Springer. I think the 6-year deal is what the market, I guess, called for him. And he's only 31 years old, which I know technically analytics will tell you he's a little older or too old for a 6-year deal. But I think it's perfect for a guy like him who can play center field for, the majority maybe of that 6-year deal and then shift over to right or left towards the end of that deal.
Yeah, and Rob, that George Springer, just a fantastic player. I mean, he's a
Yeah.
fantastic player offensively, defensively. Right now, as you said, I mean, he can provide some good defense from center field. But also, he has shown over the years in Houston to be a big time player in the
Yes.
postseason, right? And so to have a guy like that, and he can hit, he hits lead off, and yet he has all that pop in his bat. He has good speed, just a really sound player. And as you said, I think that for the majority of this 6-year deal, if not all of it, I think there's every reason to believe that he will continue to be a very productive player.
Yeah.
And if he is, and that young talent that's around him, as you mentioned, begins to mature, man, Toronto, at least offensively, can really be a handful in the
Oh yeah.
American League.
Definitely. And then we see, they made some noise last year making the playoffs, and the Rays kind of declined a little bit, losing some pitching like Snell. He's gone, who was their ace. So, Toronto can kind of take advantage of that. The Orioles they're not going to be in there. The Red Sox are still a huge question mark in my eyes. So really, Toronto's biggest challenge in the East would be the Yankees, obviously. And I do still think the Rays will be there, but I think the Rays and Blue Jays now, they're more even than people think they are, especially with the signing of Springer. And we'll see what else they do.
Yeah, and as and you mentioned the Rays and the trading of Blake Snell, and um You know, the Rays obviously have been one of the better teams in baseball the last 2.5 years, right? The
Yes.
second half of 18, they really finished strong. Then they made the playoffs in 19, winning 96 games. And then obviously was, the second best team in all of Major League Baseball in this 60 game season, advancing to the World Series against the Dodgers. So they've been a very, very good team, but they traded away a big piece.
Yeah.
And they have been maybe challenged is too hard of a word, but I think last year offensively they were a bit challenged. They
Yeah.
weren't a juggernaut of an offensive team, and so that subtraction of Blake Snell really could be magnified for a team like Tampa, who doesn't really swing the biggest bat in the AL East.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And like you said, the loss of Snell, you know, oh, he's a pitcher. What is that going to do for them offensively? Well, that guy can save a few games. He can win you. I mean, he won 20 games a couple years ago. That's 20 games that they may lose, or we'll say 15 games that they may lose that they wouldn't win as a result of losing Snell, and that's huge because that could be the difference between a team like Toronto, jumping ahead of them in the standing, and the Rays just completely missing out on the playoffs in general. So that's a huge, huge loss for the Rays trading away Snell. Obviously, we saw the drama with Snell and Cash and all that stuff. So maybe that factored into the fact that Snell wanted out, or the organization wanted to move on from Snell, or something like that. But I think it's a huge loss for the Rays and a huge gain for the Jays.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And speaking about the American League East, and you mentioned the Yankees, and that's your team, right? You are
Yes.
an unapologetic Yankees fan. um, uh, they brought back DJ LeMahieu, which I think was something they had to do. But at some
Yeah.
point along the way, DJ was expressing some um, some concern is that the Yankees weren't moving fast enough to bring him back. The Yankees did get it done, but how big was the re-signing uh, of DJ LeMahieu for the Yankees?
I think it's definitely something that had to be done, like you said. And if you look at social media, Yankee fans are the worst. We are the worst on social media because we'll love a guy one day and then say we don't need him the next day. So it's crazy the amount of we can let LeMahieu walk and sign X, Y, and Z, and we'll be fine. But I think the Yankees really needed to get LeMahieu signed. Obviously, it looks like they just kind of waited for the arbitration period to then see kind of where their budget was going to be. It's kind of funny talking Yankees and budget, but I guess they were waiting for that to see what to offer them. But I think they got a great deal, a team-friendly deal for a guy like LeMahieu at just 15 million a year. He was making 12 mil over the first contract he signed with New York. So to get him for an extra 3 mil, considering the type of player he is and the kind of seasons he's had for that team and the impact he's had at the top of the lineup. We just talked about George Springer and what he can do for the Jays as a leadoff hitter. LeMahieu is that kind of guy. He's, you know, a great player to have. And I remember when they first signed LeMahieu a couple years ago, a lot of people were like, "Who? This is who we kind of went with instead of Machado." And when I saw the LeMahieu signing, I was like, "Oh heck yeah, this is the guy the Yankees have been missing the last few years." To kind of make that difference in the playoffs, the guy who can just hit, just a professional hitter. So I think the Yankees had to make this deal. Similar to the Jays, though, I still think there are question marks in the pitching, and they actually agreed to a deal just not too long ago, actually, for Jamison Talion of the Pirates, who he's coming back from a second Tommy John surgery, so we'll see what he brings to the table. But I still think the Yankees have question marks in the rotation and in the bullpen as well. So we'll see. But LeMahieu had to get done. That's a no-brainer.
And you speak about the Yankees rotation and some of the issues that they have there. You know, but they did sign Kluber. And, we'll see what happens there. But what about a
Yeah.
guy like Tanaka? Do you think the Yankees will bring back Tanaka? I mean, there's been some rumors that he might be headed to Japan. But I think Tanaka has been a solid. He's not going to be the top of the rotation guy, but they don't need that. They have Garrett Cole to fit
Yeah.
that bill. But what about Tanaka? Do you think the Yankees should bring him back?
I always thought they should. Maybe a short term, 1 year deal with an option, a 2 year deal kind of thing. I don't know if they are going to bring him back at this point, especially after just acquiring another starter. But Tanaka has been, when the Yankees signed him originally, Cashman said Tanaka was, don't expect him to be an ace. He's going to be a middle of the rotation guy. And it's exactly what he's been. He's been inconsistent at times, but, with the exception of the last year of the playoffs, when it was Tanaka time in the playoffs, you kind of knew what you were getting. He was going to go out there, he was going to grind, he was going to give it his all. And the results were there. He's one of the best pitchers in the postseason. Like I said, with the exception of this past postseason. So I always wanted them to sign Tanaka back. I thought he would be a great piece to have with the addition of Cole. It kind of takes away the question marks because he's going to be there for the 25 to 30, 32 starts or something like that. So maybe he's one of those pitchers that the Yankees are just kind of waiting, seeing if his price drops or something like that. But I don't know. I like Tanaka. It would be unfortunate to kind of see him in a different uniform because he's one of those guys that you kind of got attached to the moment he signed and saw the kind of pitcher he was. But it's unfortunate that I just don't think the Yankees are actually going to dish out the money and sign a guy like him.
Yeah, and he may be one of those guys too who you won't truly appreciate until he's gone
Yeah,
because
big time.
he's not, like I said, the top of the rotation guy, but he's provided some solid quality
Yeah.
over the years. Um, now we talked about your Yankees, and people who have listened to this show know that I'm a Mets fan. And my Metsies have been doing some things as well. I mean, they signed Trevor May to
Yeah,
shore up
that was a
or
good
help to
piece.
shore up the bullpen. They signed James McCann, to a 4-year deal to man the plate
Hmm.
and so forth. Marcus Stroman accepted the qualifying offer, so they got him back in the fold. Um, and even though it's not a free agent signing, the biggest acquisition by the Mets by far this offseason has been trading for perennial all-star Francisco Lindor,
Yeah.
who will be a free agent at the end of this year. So, the Mets traded for him with the idea, I'm sure, of signing him to a long-term deal, similar to what the Dodgers did with Mookie Betts last year. Not saying that Lindor will get, the same deal that Betts got, but we won't have to throw any benefits for Francisco Lindor if he were to sign a contract. Um, but what do you think about what the Mets have done so far? And they may not be done. I mean, they're still linked to Trevor Bauer, and so we'll see what
Yeah.
happens there to Brad Hand. But so far, what do you think about what the Mets under their new owner, Steve Cohen, have done so far?
I think it's great because you want to see, for a long time the Mets are the little brother to the Yankees, but I kind of like when they're evenly matched and they're going at each other and they're actually both good teams. So it's great to see that, and I'm excited to have Steve Cohen there as an owner because it seems like he really loves the game of baseball and he really wants to improve these New York Mets and bring some light back to Queens and blow them up and be this great franchise in New York. Like he's really trying to go after the Yankees, and that's great for the game. That's great for baseball. Steve Cohen seems to be an owner who's very in tune with what the fans want and the fans like. He's very active on social media and stuff like that. So I think it's great for the game, and I think the Mets moves of getting Lindor in a trade, and Carlos Carrasco was also in that deal, who not a lot of people are talking about it, but he's a pretty solid piece in the rotation. So that Mets rotation, with Syndergaard coming back from his injury, that could be a very scary rotation if they're able to, stay healthy and just kind of be strong throughout the season. So, with Lindor there, switch hitting shortstop, defensively he's amazing. I think they're going to end up signing him long term. I don't think you make that deal without that kind of being on the back burner saying, hey, we're going to sign you long term. I think they just have to figure out the numbers. But the moves the Mets have made, and like you said, I don't think they're done. I think it's great for baseball. I think it's great for New York, and it's exciting to see that the Mets are actually trying to take New York back from the Yankees. It's awesome to see. Even as a Yankee fan, I'll say that.
And you know what else, Rob, is going on here? The Mets have to do whatever they can to improve to stay relevant in the NL East,
Yep.
right? I mean, the Braves have shown that they're legit. You know what I mean? With a young core that seems to be getting better. So,
Yeah.
the Braves are there. The Phillies, you just never know if they're going to hit their stride with Harper and some of the other players they have over there, but they can't be taken for granted. I think the Nats have fallen off some. We talked about how, even last year, it was an open question about how the Nats were going to respond, having lost. I'm blanking on his name. I can't believe it. The third baseman.
Rendon.
Rendon, yeah, how they lost Rendon, and so Scherzer's getting a little older, and so you wonder about his
Yeah.
effectiveness and so forth. The Marlins, look, they made the postseason in a 60-game season.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read too much into that, but they could also be showing some signs of improvement. But certainly, I think with the Phillies and more importantly, with the Braves, the Mets have to look to get better. And then, as you said, you're here in New York. The Yankees have always been the team that has stolen the headlines, and I say that in a good way because they deserved it. They've played better. But Steve Cohen has come in, and I like him too. I like he brings a little swag with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you kind of like that if you're a Mets fan, and even if you're just a baseball fan, because I think if the Mets are relevant, then then baseball as a whole is better. You know what I mean? Where
Oh,
you can have
definitely.
you know the Mets and the Yankees out there competing, and having October baseball in New York is always been special, and hopefully that'll happen, both in the Bronx and in Queens this year. So we'll see.
Yeah, that'll be great to have New York rocking like that with, games in Queens and the Bronx. That'll be awesome in October.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt. So it's been an interesting off season, even though, as you said, still slow, not quite hot stove, in any sense of the word, but there have been some moves, some intriguing moves, and there's still some big pieces that have to fall into place. And so we'll see how that goes. But if we can transition and segue for a second away from free agency, again, as we're recording this on Sunday, January 24, a couple of days ago, right, the baseball world was rocked yet again with the death of one of the all-time greats. And here you're really talking one of the all-time greats in
Hmm.
Hank Aaron, right? And the list of Hall of Fame baseball players that have passed away in the past 6 to 8 months is just really remarkable. When you think about the players: Seaver, Gibson, Lou Brock, Joe Morgan, Al Kaline. I mean, Phil Negro. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Tommy Lasorda passed away a few weeks ago. But Hank Aaron passing away at the age of 86. What are your thoughts about Hank Aaron and his place in the game, and hearing the news of his passing?
It was definitely a big shock. Just to see the notification just kind of jump up on my phone. I was like, oh crap, Hank Aaron. Because we didn't hear anything about him being sick or anything like that in the recent days. So it was definitely a shock to see that news pop up. As far as his place in baseball, the guy is an absolute legend. And we use that word legend a lot when it comes to some great players. But Hank Aaron was a legend. Like, we're talking about Mount Rushmore type baseball player. And a lot of people, when you say Hank Aaron, they only think about the home run record.
Mm-hmm.
And that was huge, obviously super significant, especially when he played. At the time he played, he had to deal with a lot of the racism and the injustices and all that stuff. So for him, a black man to break the home run record from Babe Ruth's home run record was a huge deal. But there was so much more to Hank Aaron than just the home runs. The dude was an absolute all-around five-tool baseball player. He could run, he could field, he could steal bases, he could hit. Over 300 average, over 3,700 hits in his career. I saw a stat today that he had more hits as a Brave than Pete Rose had as a Red, which is insane. That's crazy to me. So Hank Aaron, the baseball player, an absolute legend. Definitely, like I said, one of the Mount Rushmores in baseball history, and I think he will always have that place in history. I don't think anybody's going to overcome or surpass what he's been able to do in the game of baseball. And just as a guy, you see these interviews and things like that after his passing. To speak of the way they speak of his character makes him seem like so much more. He's so much more than just this legendary baseball player. It seems like he was just a great guy, a real ambassador of the game, a real ambassador of just life, and what he meant and signified to so many people was absolutely amazing. And it's huge, the impact that he's had on so many lives and on so many players coming up. So it's a huge loss for the baseball world, and a huge loss for humanity, honestly.
Right, and you said that really well. I mean, it's the baseball, but it's so much more than baseball. For me, Hank Aaron was baseball. Growing up as a kid, I played baseball with my friends, and we loved baseball. We played baseball and all kinds of other games related to baseball, stickball and so forth. But Hank Aaron was one of the guys. And, one of the things I will remember, as you said, he was much more than the home runs. But for me, Hank Aaron will always be the home run king. And I know Barry Bonds has passed him. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Barry Bonds, but I think, I'm not alone in the thought of always thinking of Hank Aaron as the home run king of baseball. And I remember I remember two things about Hank Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's record of 714. One, I remember that he ended the prior season, like at 713, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And I remember being concerned. Now, when Hank Aaron broke the record, I was 11 years old. So, the season before, I'm 10, and he doesn't break the record. And I'm concerned whether or not he's going to get a chance to break the record, because it was known at the time about the death threats and the intimidation that he was living with. And so that offseason was a long offseason, right? If you were rooting for Aaron to break the home run record. And then I remember watching the game when he did break the record. And Rob, there are three things that stand out for me. One, obviously, he broke the record, when he hit that home run against the Dodgers, right? So that obviously stands out. And I was watching the game. So, again, I'm 11 years old, but I'm a baseball fan. I'm watching that. I watched the game. So one, him breaking the record was just phenomenal. But the other thing I remember about that game was, as he was rounding the bases, how that guy came out of the stands and was patting him on the back. And just thinking about how dangerous that was, considering all of the threats and so forth that Hank and his family had been getting. So I remember that. But then here's the other thing that I remember, and it's sort of the smallest of them all, but I'm just being honest. I remember when he hit the home run, and I'm a kid, and I've been rooting for him for all this time to pass Babe Ruth, waited the whole summer for him to pass Babe Ruth. And if you go back and watch the tape, that ball was out. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he hit that ball out the park. It wasn't no fence scraper, right?
Yeah.
But what I'll remember about that is that Bill Buckner, who was playing left field for the Dodgers, jumped up on the fence as if somehow he was going to catch a ball that was clearly out, right? And I'm thinking to myself, what's he doing? You know what I mean? And to me, it was like false hustle kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was also he was trying his best to keep Aaron from breaking the record. Now I'm a kid, and through the lens of a kid, I looked at that and I said, "Who's that guy?" And when I found out it was Bill Buckner, I'm telling you, Rob, I'm telling you the truth. I'm not saying this is right. It's just honest. From that day forward, I didn't like Bill Buckner. And when you fast forward to 1986 and the Mets are playing the Red Sox in the World Series and the ball goes through Buckner's legs, my response was, that's what you get. Because you shouldn't have been trying to stop Hank Aaron from getting the 715. Now, I'm not saying that makes any sense. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not even saying it's not a sign of something's wrong with me. But I'm just trying to tell you that was one of the things that I took away from Hank Aaron's 715. Now, I've come to appreciate Bill Buckner. Bill Buckner was a great player too. But I'm going to
Yeah.
tell you, from that day right there when he did that, nah, Bill Buckner was not my guy.
I gotta watch that highlight again now and just notice that.
Yeah, because he jumped up on
Oh
the
man.
fence, and it was like he was no good. He was no way he was going to catch that ball. And I'm thinking he trying to rain on Hank's parade. So from that
Yeah.
day forward, man, I didn't appreciate Bill Buckner. But that's more of a little aside. But yeah, but Hank Aaron was the guy, man. As a young guy, young kid, young African American kid playing baseball. Hank, man. And as you said, he was so much more than the home runs. And then the last thing I will say is, and you said this well, it was the dignity and the grace in which he carried himself all the time. All the
Yeah.
time. I mean, Hank Aaron to me, he almost carried himself with it was almost like an air of nobility about him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And as you said, just a great ambassador for the game of baseball, a great inspiration, and his impact transcended baseball and transcended sports. Because not only
Yep.
other athletes in other sports, but you have people in politics and other walks of life who were inspired and continue to be inspired by Hank Aaron. I mean, you're talking about just a giant of a baseball player and a giant of a man, and you know,
Yeah.
it's you know, it's a sad day, and baseball's going to miss Hank Aaron. But man, we were blessed to have Hank Aaron. And I think that's one of the things I want to hold on to. You know what I mean? Sometimes we get so
Of
sad,
course. Yeah.
but at the same time, I want to just appreciate the blessing that was and will continue to be Hank Aaron, one of the greats in the game for sure.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
anyway, man. Well, listen, brother. It's been great, man, talking with you today as we talk a little baseball. I'm looking forward to it, though. You and I just coming together on a regular basis, talking baseball, talking basketball. There's some NFL football today, Championship Sunday, right? And so
That's right.
there's a lot of things going on out there, man. And I look forward to the opportunity as we, move ahead to discussing all of this with you. So I'm excited about that and grateful, man, to have you on today.
Yeah. This is awesome, man. I'm really looking forward to what we have going on.
So am I. So am I. So, all you, for all the listeners out there, continue to tune in as Rob and I continue to co-host Sports 360 and examining all of the issues, the people, the personalities, the controversies, all the good things in and around the world of sports. So looking forward to it. So Rob, we'll reconnect soon. We'll probably be back here in 2 weeks. That's going to be the plan. Every other week, but that's subject to change based on how things unfold in the world of sports. So looking forward to it, man. So good conversation today, and I'm sure there'll be many more to come.
Sounds like a plan, man. Looking forward to it.
All right, brother. Well, listen, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll be back here real soon with another edition of Sports 360.